Is GNX a classic? A lot of people out there are asking the question, is GNX, you know, Kendrick Lamar's most recent studio album, his 6th studio album, in fact, is it a classic? First thing I would tell you is stop trying to make things classics after a week. Stop trying to make things classic after 8, 9 days. You know, I used to be a music journalist, and I used to review albums, and they would send us the album. Back then it'd be a CD or a tape in January for a March release. So by the time the album came out, we had a review of it, but we had a review of it because we'd been listening to it for weeks, if not months at a time. When I reviewed Blueprint or Blueprint 2, you know, I got it long before it came out. So by the time it hit the Source or it hit Double XL or hit whatever magazine, we had consumed it, we had read it, we had lived with the album, and we didn't have the distraction of everybody else telling us how great it is. Right? You had A&Rs, you had street teams, you had stuff like that, but you still had the opportunity to sit in your house with this album that nobody else had. Now, it ain't like that no more. Albums get released instantly. Hot takes come up instantly. Tweets come up instantly. Album reviews come up instantly. And people are instantly declaring something a classic or terrible or trash, excellent, etc., mid, all that stuff. And it's like, family, why don't we start? Why don't we start to consume music slower, to sit with it, and to not be a prisoner of the moment? I'm old enough to remember when some stinker albums came out, but we were so, example, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan, but Blueprint 2 was not his best work. 2.1 was solid. Blueprint 2, you know, that bloated double album wasn't very good, but I remember people in the moment were like, yo, this is fire. And they had the same energy they had with Blueprint 1, which actually was a classic and one of the best albums ever made, right, in the genre. You know, I remember when Magna Carta Holy Grail came out, and because of all the Samsung advertisements and Hov and Rick Rubin on the commercial, all that stuff, when it came out, people were like, yo, this is fire. You can't name 5 people in your entire social network that think Magna Carta Holy Grail is a top 5 album of Hov's. You know, fuck with me, you know, I got it. It's still my shit, though. But the rest of it, I could live without. Point being, sit with it. Don't be impulsive. If you ask me right now, after 9 days of listening to Kendrick Lamar's new album, if it's a classic, I would say no. If we're defining classic, it depends on how we define classic. Is it an enjoyable album? Yes. Is it an important album? Yes. But I don't think Kendrick Lamar makes any albums that aren't enjoyable and important. I've never heard Kendrick Lamar put out anything that's trash. Even Untitled Unmastered, to me, is an excellent piece of work, even though it's not a traditional studio album, even though it's not his best work. It's still it's important work, and it was for what it was. So when I say it's not a classic, it's not a diss of Kendrick Lamar. I think the album's amazing. You know, I think the album's really good. I think it's really good. I think the production is impeccable. You know, I first heard it like on my phone, like in a car, and I didn't, you know, love it because I couldn't hear all the sounds. I put on some headphones. That shit was crazy. I put it in the car. That shit was amazing, sonically amazing. The sequencing of it, I don't love, but it's a good album. Songs like what's it called? The Tupac joint, Reincarnated, is, I mean, like I said on the Joe Budden podcast, this joint is, I mean, he's out Tupac and Tupac. It's amazing. I love Heart Part 6. I love Dodger Blue. You know, obviously, you know, Whacked Out Murals is amazing. Like, there's a lot of great stuff on here. This is a West Coast monster. And somebody said something really interesting here. Zach Lamel said, look, if you're from the West Coast, it's a classic. Everywhere else is a fire album. I mean, that's also an important way to think about things. Although, you know, there are West Coast albums that are also universal classics, like Doggy Style, like The Chronic. You know, I'll even take the Documentary. You know what I mean? Like, there are West Coast albums that are for everybody. Death Certificate, you know. So I don't want to say, well, you got to be from the West Coast to appreciate it. It's a West Coast sound. It's a West Coast vibe. I mean, you can't listen to Squabble Up and not feel that. When you watch that Squabble Up video, by the way, which made me like the song a lot more, is crazy. So I like the album a lot. If I were giving mics like we used to do in the Source, I would give it 4 out of 5. if you put a gun to my head, I could probably be convinced to make it 4.5, maybe, but it feels like a 4. And that's not a diss. It's an amazing album. I just know that Kendrick Lamar is capable of more. And maybe it's not fair to compare Kendrick Lamar to himself. I mean, I remember there was a string of Tribe albums that kept getting, you know, these critical reviews that were that were stellar. And I didn't think each Tribe album was as. I thought that, like, People's Instinctive Travels, you know, I might look at differently, right? Than you might. You get what I'm saying? But it was still a classic. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't not a classic, right? I might think Low End Theory was better. You might think Midnight Marauders was better, but they were all still classics, even if I ranked them differently, right? I'm okay ranking different Kendrick albums. Like, I can say Damn was a classic. I can say Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. To me, Good Kid, M.A.A.D City is Kendrick's best album. It's his best work. I think that's a masterpiece. So for me, so yeah, I do judge everything against Good Kid, M.A.A.D City, but I still had To Pimp a Butterfly with a super high rating. I probably gave it 4.5. You know, I think actually I told Double XL was a 5. I withdrew that. I was being a prisoner of the moment. Point being, I could still appreciate The Pimp a Butterfly, but it wasn't Good Kid. I could appreciate Damn grew on me. Damn is actually brilliant forwards and backwards. But I still don't think it was Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. But I think they're all in elite status. I think this is just one step below that, but that's not a diss. And people out here sometimes think that if you some people think that if you don't call something 5 mics or say that it's perfect or something that it's a diss, it's like at this point, it's like, why you disrespect? It's like everything isn't disrespect. Some things are just a critical assessment. What comments say back in the day? You know, if I don't like it, I don't like it. Don't mean that I'm hating. And in this case, I don't even dislike it. It's just there's just better stuff out there. From Kendrick, I'm saying. But again, I'm gonna say it one more time. Something can not be Kendrick's best and still be a classic because Kendrick is a star of stars. He's a boss of all bosses. He is an elite, super, uber, duper elite MC at all levels. So, but I think Kendrick held something back. And I think y'all are going to see what Kendrick held back in about a month. I think Kendrick's going to put out another album. And I think that one might be the home run. That one might be the masterpiece. That might be the 5 mic joint. I say that because this feels incomplete. I say that because the Super Bowl is coming up in February, and I suspect he wouldn't put this project out if it's the only project out this far from the Super Bowl. I think Kendrick just got the game in a chokehold right now. He's about to DMX this shit. Remember when DMX put them to 2 albums and they were both crazy, like back to back? I think that's what you just might see. Ridwan Sanusi said GNX is great. I don't think Kendrick made GNX for it to be a classic. He made this album as a value add to the cultural moment. I think that's right. And he did it in a way that's true to him, that's true to the West Coast sound. He did it in a way that honors where he is, and he didn't try to make more Not Like Us's, right? And he didn't put Not Like Us as a bonus track or as a track on the album, which I appreciated, right? He said, I'm in this lane. I'm not going to pretend to be something else just because I'm hot. I love it. I love what he did. I love what he's doing. So shout out to Kendrick Lamar for an album that, again, I think is very special, very good. And I can't wait for the next thing.